seeing our slide deck. Is that correct? If I can get a thumbs up from the panelists. Awesome, thank you. So today you'll be joining us for how your county is spending your money on affordable housing. This is an informational session that we've put together with our partners in order to bring to you the most up-to-date information on the county's investment in affordable housing. We're going to go through some basic guidelines for our webinar today, and we're going to be introducing our speakers. As you will notice, not everyone has the opportunity to speak. We have set it so that if you would like to submit a question, you can use the link in the chat or the chat function in the Zoom. También tenemos disponible el recurso de interpretación para los que hablen español. Pueden oprimir este botón en la pantalla. Si tienen algún problema, también pueden dirigir sus preguntas hacia Fabiola o Norma. Ellas les van a estar ayudando ahora. Fabiola ya está con nosotros y Norma estará con nosotros pronto. We are also recording this on Facebook and YouTube. We're going to be sharing this information with as many people as possible. We think this is very critical resources, and we're looking forward to a great webinar today. Some ground rules. Each speaker has about 15 minutes to present, and then following a Q&A. My name is Rocio Molina, and I'm going to be coordinating the Q&A. You all have a link to submit questions. The questions that are going to be updated based on the portion of the presentation that we are discussing. We also will be having an interview portion to today's webinar, which will also include a conversation with developers. You're welcome to submit questions throughout that portion to be incorporated, but please be mindful that we do have a couple of questions that will be directing our conversation during that portion. Okay, and now I hand it off to Alex Shore.
Thanks, Rocio. Appreciate it. Hey, everyone. I'm Alex with Catalyze SV. Thank you so much for being here. We really, really appreciate it. I know there are more folks joining us, a couple having trouble getting in, so we'll get them in as soon as we can. We wanted to talk about, 5 years ago, really almost 6 years that come this November, the voters of Santa Clara County voted to approve this bond measure for $950
En 2016, los votantes aprobaron la medida.
Sorry, 1 second. Alex, I believe you have the interpretation control now.
Oh, okay.
Sorry about that, everyone. A little technical issue. We're going to put everyone who is going to participate in the Spanish interpretation into a space where they can listen to the presentation, but also receive information in Spanish. Give us 1 second while we iron that out.
I think I just did.
Oh, perfect.
Yep.
Okay.
Great. Sorry about that, Norma. So yeah, this ballot measure, $950 million investment that the County of Santa Clara can use towards affordable housing. And next slide. And so we wanted to talk about all the ways that that money is being spent, so you can understand how in your community the Measure A money is being used. Rocio, can you go to the next slide?
Awesome. So we're going to hand it off to Ray Branson with Destination Home, who's going to tell us a little bit more about the Measure A bond measure of 2016.
Certainly. Good evening. My name is Ray Branson. I'm the Chief Operating Officer with Destination Home, a public-private partnership that's focused on ending homelessness here in Santa Clara County. Could you advance the next slide, please? Rocio, could you advance the next slide, please?
We're not seeing the slides anymore, Rocio.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm not sure what happened there.
We're just seeing the one that says $950 million investment in affordable housing.
Okay. That's strange. Give me 1 second. Okay, how about now?
You'll
Okay,
need to
so
go
this
back.
is the first slide. There you go.
You could keep going back, please.
Okay.
Great. Thank you very much. So good evening again. Alex mentioned in 2016, voters approved a $950 million affordable housing bond. $700 million of that bond was dedicated specifically for extremely low income and supportive housing to help people that were high risk of homelessness or were already homeless and living on the streets. We know that homelessness, we know that homelessness can be ended by housing. And we know that the solution that can really get us over the goal line is to build the most deeply affordable housing for the people who need it the most. Now, homelessness is everywhere in Santa Clara County. While there's some focus in San Jose with over 6,000 people on the streets, we see it from Gilroy to Palo Alto. It's a condition affecting so many of our residents. And what you're seeing on the slide before you right now is the reality that we have homeless people living on the streets of every city in Santa Clara County. Next slide. Who are these people? Well, I think the most important thing to know is that these are our neighbors. 81% were residents of Santa Clara County when they became homeless. These are people that have been living here for a long time. And these are also people that once they're on the streets, desperately want housing. 89% of the people that were surveyed said they wanted to move back in. Many of them have disabilities. Oh, please go back. Many of them have disabilities, have lost home due to divorce, loss of job or eviction. They have children. They're young adults leaving the foster care system, veterans, and people of color. Next slide, please. But one commonality is that almost all of them are living on the brink of homelessness almost every day. Now, when we talk about extremely low income, what we're talking about are people earning 30% or less of the area median income. For a family of four here in Santa Clara County, that's $41,000 a year. And while that seems like so little money, over 65,000 households in Santa Clara County are experiencing that reality. And 45,000 of those 65 households are paying more than 50% of their incomes every month towards rent, which means one financial emergency, one sadly pandemic, one loss of a job, one medical emergency, they can find themselves on the streets. So homelessness is a reality facing so many of our residents. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, we just don't have the housing. And what you're looking at is a bunch of numbers here, but if you look in that far left column where you see ELI, you'll see 42,000 household needed to get people off the streets and make sure they're not in that place of severe rent burden. And the planned production over that time period was 8,000. So we're not keeping up, and it's going to cost billions of dollars to do so. Next slide, please. And then we look at the likelihood of people becoming homeless because we operate a homelessness prevention system here in Santa Clara County. We see that the people most likely to fall onto the streets, the most vulnerable, are those same extremely low-income households. So this assessment is telling us something that's very plain and obvious. But if you are extremely low income in Santa Clara County, there's a good chance you're going to end up on the streets sooner or later. Next slide, please. That's why we have a strategy that we're employing through Measure A of building homes for people and getting them into housing. Getting them into housing as quickly as we can. If we can get them into extremely low income housing before they end up on the streets, fantastic. If we can get them into supportive housing once they've ended up homeless, that's excellent. The idea is we get them in housing first, and then we're able to address all of the other challenges from medical issues to mental health, to employment, to physical wellness to recovery once they're in a safe and stable home. And we've been doing this here since 2015 with our county partners. Next slide. And the results are absolutely incredible. 96% of the people that we're helping through this Housing First methodology are staying housed for a year or more. So we know it works. We know the homes that we're building are creating safe and stable places for people to live, and we know that our community is recovering as a result. Next slide, please. We're making great progress. Just in our community plan to end homelessness, which is the plan that we have throughout the county endorsed by all the cities, we've got a goal from 2020 to 2025 of housing 20,000 people. In just the past 2 years, we've put nearly 6,000 people into homes, putting us 30% of the way. So we're making great progress. We've got a lot more work to do. Next slide. We also know that we need to make sure that people aren't ending up on the streets. So they need financial assistance and homes that they can afford to stay housed. And we've kept 2,140 people in their homes, exceeding our goals, putting us close to that goal of 2,500 families staying safe and stable every year. Next slide, please. And even more than that, we're achieving a reduction. So we need to make sure that the people that are ending up on the streets, the inflow, we call it, is going down and down. So we can finally start turning the tide. We're making great progress towards that as well. Next slide. And most importantly, and what you're going to hear a lot more about from our great partners at the county, is that Measure A is working. Of our goal of 4,800 units in supportive housing, in extremely low income, and all of the types of homes that we need to make sure people are housed, we've added 3,600 units towards the goal of 4,800. We're on track and we're doing extremely well. While not all of these developments are open yet, they're in the pipeline, they're making progress, they're moving forward. And it's a testament to all of our community partners, from developers to city and county to nonprofit leaders, that these units are moving forward. Next slide. And it's happening everywhere. Some people think this is just in San Jose, but as you can see, we're developing in all the places where people need homes. From Gilroy to Palo Alto, new developments are coming online every year, and more of our residents are getting to have these beautiful, fantastic new developments opened and providing them with safe and stable places. Next slide, please. And here it is, results, a nice small blue box talking about tremendous impact. 8 cities, nearly $600 million approved for housing, 3,700 new apartments and another 720 renovated in 41 housing developments, and some money for home buyer as well, because we need people to get a slice of the pie and start building equity too. So incredible results, lots and lots more work to do, but we're moving in the right direction and we're really changing the trajectory for so many residents in Santa Clara County. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ray. That was great. Okay, so we have a few minutes for questions. One question, and I already shared this with the panelists, that we already received in the link, and please feel welcome to submit more questions in the link, is, how can we get more affordable housing built? I think we just heard from Ray that they've been able to build great affordable housing with this resource. So Ray, do you have any insights into us how we can keep this going?
Yeah, I mean, more than anything else, we continue to need funding to build housing. So Measure A was a tremendous, first of its kind measure that the voters passed. 67% of the voters voted for Measure A in Santa Clara County. But we're going to need more of that funding. We're at the city level, we have support from property transfer tax and Measure E, which has just put another $150 million into affordable housing development. But we're going to need another big revenue source. And whether that's coming at the local level or at the state or from the federal government, if we don't have another big dedicated source, it's going to slow down production. It's going to mean we're building less homes. So I think it's going to be incumbent on all of the voters and residents in Santa Clara County to figure out what the best next step is and to get behind it, because I think without it, without too many more of our neighbors will suffer.
Nice. And one of the visuals that you saw today was a map, and I will go back to it here, of the project so far. Ray, can you tell us how to access this map?
Yeah, there is a link to it. I think on the presentation, you can also go to the Destination Home website and look at the supportive housing map. And it's great, it's interactive. You can click on each of the developments and take a look at the name, the size, the number of units, the mix, and the developer and the service provider. So it's really, really an interesting resource. I encourage people to take a look at it.
Awesome. And let me take a look here and see if we have any other questions, or please feel welcome to submit questions in the chat to participants. One question that I would have for you, Ray, and looking at this chart is, what can we do to assist this category a little more here?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So rapid rehousing units are, you can think of them as affordable units for people that are exiting homelessness. So they've been on the streets, but they don't necessarily have a disabling condition. They need some time limited support. So some subsidy, maybe access to employment, maybe some other type of help. Here in Santa Clara County, on top of that extra help, we also know they need an affordable place to live. So this is a hybrid of bringing together an affordable housing unit with a service intervention that we have in the homeless services work. So I think the good news is that we've got a lot of great nonprofit developers here who are really stepping up and saying they want to build more of these units, even though it's a little bit of an unconventional and creative approach to dealing with this high cost of living market. So, I think we just need to keep cheering on some of these great developers who are willing to take on more and more of these projects with rapid rehousing units, because we all know how important they are.
Awesome. We got another question in the chat. Now, this is a policy question, Ray. I don't know if you can answer this for us, but are you familiar with the 35 billion surplus and whether or not that will be accessed for affordable housing?
I think we can leave that to our partners at the county.
I agree. Thank you so much, Andu. Let's see here. Okay. Perfect. So it seems like we're good on the background of Measure A. Thank you so much, Ray. Really appreciate that introduction to the subject. Up next, we're going to go dig into the Measure A portfolio as it stands now with Natalie Monk of the Office of Supportive Housing.
Thanks, Rocio. Next slide, please. So next slide. We have completed 8 projects so far using the 2016 Measure A Affordable Housing Bond, and I want to just briefly give you a few highlights from each one. So this is the Veranda, our very first Measure A project, completed in May of 2019. It's located in Cupertino, and the developer is Charities Housing. It has a total of 19 units, and 6 were set aside as permanent supportive housing. The architect was Studio E Architects, and personally, I just really love the strong roof lines and the angled walls. It's just a gorgeous project. Next, please. This is Villas on the Park, developed by Affirmed Housing. 84 units. It's a 100% PSH development that was completed in October of 2019. The design was by Dahlen Group. Next, please. This is the Crossings on Monterey. It was the first Measure A project in Morgan Hill. 39 units with 20 set aside as permanent supportive housing. And the developer is Urban Housing Communities. Next, please. This is Monterey Gateway Senior Apartments. It's a 75-unit project by Danco and located in Gilroy. It was completed during the early pandemic and has 37 PSH units. As you can see, our projects draw on a wide variety of architectural styles depending on their surroundings and context. Next, please. This is Lee Avenue Senior Apartments. It's a 64-unit project by First Community Housing in San Jose. I think it's a really beautiful minimalist design that really takes advantage of the curve of the street. As you can see, the different massing pieces radiating outwards. The design is by Architects Fora, and it's a 100% PSH development. Next, please. This is Capsule Gardens, located in the Little Portugal Urban Village and Mayfair neighborhood of East San Jose. The design is by SGPA Architecture and Planning, and the Quetzal bird inspires the building's colors and architectural detailing, and you can see a feather motif at the railing and metalwork throughout the building, and there's a distinctive wall pattern on the main corner tower element. So you can just really see the theme and the colors on this one. I love it. Next, please. This is Calabasas Community Apartments developed by Allied Housing. It's 145 units in the city of Santa Clara with 80 units set aside as PSH, completed back in November 2021. Next, please. This is IMSE Village by First Community Housing. The design was by OJK Architecture and Planning, now Architects Fora. This project has 135 units with the majority set aside as permanent supportive housing. And it was just completed in February. All right, next, please. So we also have 11 projects that are currently under construction. So I'm just gonna briefly show you a few highlights from those. So these are 4 San Jose projects that are all expected to be completed later this year. Collectively, they'll provide over 300 new units, with about 40% of these units being set aside as PSH. Next. So these 4 projects should come online next year. This is another 500 plus new units, with about half of the units set aside as permanent supportive housing. Next, please. And finally, these 3 projects are expected to be completed in late 2023 or 2024. So in total, with these 11 projects, we have over 1,000 units under construction, with approximately 45% as supportive housing. Next, please. Okay. So we've accomplished a lot, but how are we lining up against our goals? Oh, back one, please. So I wanted to show you this chart. Our goal is to create 4,800 new affordable units, with 1,800 permanent supportive housing units, 1,600 as rapid rehousing units, 800 for extremely low income households, and 600 for very low income households. So we're about 76% complete on our overall goal. We still need some additional rapid rehousing units, and we're doing great on permanent supportive housing, ELI, and VLI housing, but there's always more work to do. And that concludes my portion of the presentation. I'll pass it back to you, Rocio. Oh, I think you're muted.
Thank you for that. Thank you so much, Natalie. We really appreciate your update on the most current status of the projects. I think the visuals looked beautiful, and it's so exciting to see these amazing resources coming to our community. I'm just gonna pick one and sit there for now so people can sit with the amazing progress of the resources and how the county has been able to implement that into a reality. It doesn't seem like we have any particular questions so far. Let me give everyone a chance to submit questions either via the Zoom Q&A or the link which is available in the chat. I think Natalie, we're lucky to have her here available to answer questions and really provide some clarity on this amazing development that the county is seeing. I'm also going to take a pause now to give a chance for attendees to join us who were maybe unable to. It seems like the Zoom link was a little defective, and everyone has just now received an updated link. So hopefully those that had a technical glitch will be joining us shortly. Let's see here.
It looks like there's a question about state funding. So I can share that on the county side, we do routinely apply for state funding. The state has their Housing and Community Development Department that routinely puts out NOFAs. So we try to maximize what we're applying for.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that clarity. We also got another question, where were the Crossroad apartments made? Do you know that location off the top of your head, Natalie?
I am not familiar with that project.
I don't see it as one of these. Oh, maybe. Maybe not a Measure A project, maybe a project in your community that you're thinking of. Okay, awesome. Perfect. Crossings, there we go. The Crossings project. I believe that slide says Monterey and Morgan Hill.
Yeah, that was our first Measure A project in Morgan Hill.
Oh, awesome. Okay. All right, thank you so much. We are a little ahead of schedule. Okay, so no more questions before we move on to our developers. Here we go. Awesome. Thank you for your time, says one of our attendees. Great. Okay. So next, we're going to be talking with our developers. They have joined us today to discuss how they've implemented the funds and how they've implemented this goal of creating more affordable housing in the county by constructing projects which meet that need, which are in line with these values, and they're going to describe to us a little bit more about how they approached the unique challenges of those projects, as well as all of the amazing improvements and innovations that they've made. This portion of the event is really geared towards informing you about the actual on-the-ground creation of these affordable housing development projects. You may see some of them in your community, you may have not. Ideally, you will be seeing a lot more of them in the next 2 years. And so now you can look and think, oh, well, we know who is behind all of this great development. So it is my pleasure to introduce Mike Schaefer of FCH and Carl Loff of the Housing Authority. They are two wonderful affordable housing developers, and they've graciously participated today. So I'm going to ask to unmute you guys. Oh, perfect. Thank you so much. Would you like to introduce yourself for a second? And I'll start with you, Carl.
Yeah, so I'm Carl Lauf. I'm development manager at the Santa Clara County Housing Authority. So I oversee our team of project managers that are working on our affordable housing developments.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Carl. And now I take it to you, Mike Schaefer of FCH.
Hi, everybody. I'm the construction manager for First Community Housing, and I'm an architect by training. I try to represent our wishes with our partners, our architects and our contractors, to try to guide the design of the project to go where we want it to.
Nice, awesome. And so I have a couple of questions for the two of you. This is really going to be an interview style portion of today's webinar. Again, attendees are welcome to submit questions either in the Q&A through Zoom on the separate link through our polling service. Please feel welcome to submit questions throughout the whole portion of today's agenda. With the developers, we definitely want to bring this resource to all of you to really get your questions answered. So my first question to both of you is, what does maximum density mean to you, and how do you incorporate that as part of your development process? And I'll start with you, Carl.
Yeah, thanks, Rocio. So maximizing density, I think, is it can be a good thing, but just those words on their own kind of lose a little bit of the nuance of what we're trying to accomplish with affordable housing when thinking about density. You know, some people support density. There are other people in our community where density can be a third rail. And it's something that is not particularly desirable to them. But I think really the goal of our developments is we're looking to build a community that's providing home for our community members that fits into the neighborhood, fits into the community, you know, fits into Santa Clara County, which is growing and trying to ensure that there are housing opportunities for people at all income levels. In many ways, we've been blessed with a really great economy, but it's important with that economy that we have homes to go along with that. You know, also we're trying to make efficient use of land and also efficient use of the development opportunities that we have. You know, we don't have opportunities everywhere, and so those opportunities that we have, that land that we are able to work on, we want to make the most efficient use of it that we can. And at the same time, we also want to make sure we're making efficient use of the public dollars that are supporting these developments. Once you buy the piece of land, that cost of the land is kind of pro rata divided out to each home that you build on that land. And so the more homes that you build on that land, the lower your land cost is on a per home basis. And in addition to all those reasons, you know, density can also support transit, it supports neighborhood retail, it supports other local services. And so when we think about density, those are some of the things we're thinking about.
Okay, thank you so much for that response. Awesome. And again, everyone, please feel welcome to use the Q&A portion, and then I will bring your questions to the foreground. Mike, what about you? What does Mike think about mass density?
Well, using high density designs to be efficient with your land is important. But the other part of that is where you do it. If you had a high density building that was way out on the outskirts of town, it wouldn't be terribly useful because people would be sort of stuck out there with a long way to go to get to anywhere. So we look for places that have services nearby, and especially that have transit nearby. Transit-oriented development is much more efficient in a lot of ways. It helps reduce commutes for people that have jobs nearby, or they can get to their jobs on transit, which is more efficient than commuting by car. So if you're able to do maximum density development in a transit-oriented location, you can help to reduce the number of cars that are on the road during rush hour, and reduce the amount of space on the property that needs to be dedicated to parking. So that means instead of spending your money on parking, you can spend it on more units or on amenities or services for the residents. So maximum density, it does sound kind of oppressive, but actually it's efficiency that we're talking about there.
Okay. And speaking of efficiency, I know that FCH utilizes a particular method and a particular resource when creating their buildings, and that's mass timber. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is, Mike, and how that gets you to that efficiency?
Yeah, briefly, mass timber is a construction method that's been introduced to the building codes just in the last few years. So it's a kind of a new thing. And what it is they take sort of normal sized lumber, 2x4, 2x6, 2x8, 1.5 inch thick and whatever width. And they'll put those pieces together to make big billets, they call them. And there'll be 2 or 3 or 5 layers thick of this. And they're usually something like 10 feet wide and 40 or 50 feet long. And they can use that to make the floor plates and the ceiling plates in the buildings. In addition, the other parts, like the vertical columns, will be made up from small pieces of wood that are glued together, basically. And so that's sustainable in a lot of ways. One thing is you can use it. You can use smaller trees. You don't need to have big old growth trees to make it. So they're able to use all sorts of different trees in the forests. And that's much more sustainable than cutting down the old forests. Where was I going? The other thing about mass timber is decarbonization. There's been a lot of talk over the last few years about global warming, and that's because greenhouse gases are being released into the atmosphere. And for buildings over a certain size, say 8 or 9 stories, the conventional method of building them is with concrete or steel, both of which require large amounts of energy to produce. And that involves basically burning some kind of fuel to do it. And that releases a lot of what they call greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. So with timber, you're putting pieces of wood together, you're not burning stuff, and the wood actually contains carbon dioxide that's been absorbed from the atmosphere while the trees are growing. So it rather than releasing greenhouse gases into the air, it sequesters them away, and so it's beneficial that way. It seems like a good method all the way around for that reason.
Yeah, definitely checks a lot of our boxes: sustainability and mass density. Happy to hear that those specifics are considerations that you guys take into account when designing your approach. We do have a question from the attendees, and that is maybe one of, I know that you, Mike, already mentioned mobility and access to transportation a little bit. One of our attendees wants to know if I know neither of you really speaks for the county or for all development, but what is your sense about parking allocations per unit? Do you think this trend of applying just a fraction of parkings per unit to development is going to continue?
Well, it does make sense from our point of view. I know a lot of our buildings that were made 7 or 8 years ago had full complements of parking, and it's just not used. One reason is because our residents don't all own cars. Some of them do, of course, so we need some parking, but a lot of them don't, and they don't need a parking space, and it just makes it inefficient if we build more than what we need.
Yeah, and I think our experience has been, kind of mixed. I think we've definitely had some of that experience that Mike has described. We have had some experience where, parking is utilized by our residents, and it can be something that they ask for in our buildings. In addition, you hear that from neighbors when trying to secure approvals. They're concerned about parking in the neighborhood. So it's a really important topic of discussion when considering designing a building and getting local approvals and community support for a building. Access to transit really helps. There are, alternative transportation that can be provided in addition to, building parking, but building it more efficiently. We're looking at using parking stackers in some of our future buildings, which will provide some parking, but also do it in a more efficient way.
Now, bringing it back to Measure A a little bit, how has that resource, impacted the work that you both do and trying to achieve, what makes sense for your clients, but also what makes sense for efficiency? And it sounds like you also take into account sustainability. Yeah, how has this resource supported that work?
Yeah, so I know for the housing authority, for our recent developments, they wouldn't be possible without Measure A. I mean, like so many things in life, money is really important to getting things done. And so having that resource that the community has supported and approved is really important to creating these new homes. And the financial aspect of it is really important, but another really important part of Measure A that I think is important to not lose sight of is the services aspect. It's great to build a building. As a developer, I can do that, but it's really but a brief moment in the lifespan of the building. These buildings are going to be homes for people for decades. And with the permanent supportive housing that we're creating, we really want to make sure that it's service enriched and providing the support to help folks stabilize their lives. And Measure A is really key in being able to do that. It provides the funding and the services to make that possible. I'm sorry, Rocio, you're muted.
Thank you so much. Mike, I also wanted to ask you about some of the modular buildings that you create, right? You also have affordable modular construction developments in addition to your high rises, am I correct?
Yes, modular construction is another sort of, it's not new construction method, but for apartments like we're building, it's definitely somewhat new, and we're trying to find our way to doing it. And the idea is that a large part of the construction is moved from the site into a factory, and so the units, for example, in the building, particularly if it's a permanent supportive housing building with all studios, then the units can be built as boxes in the factory, basically, sized according to what will fit on a truck, and then brought from the factory to the site and stacked with a crane. The reason for this is when a lot of the construction occurs in the factory, you get better quality control, and it means you spend less time with a construction site, less time out on the site, actually, because the stacking up the units only takes a few weeks, much less than it takes to frame the whole building. So the promise is that you could save maybe 4 or 5 months on financing, and that'll save us quite a bit of money right there. But also, since the work is done in the factory and you get better quality control, it should come out with a better product as well.
Okay, awesome. Wow. Lots of different approaches. One question that we've gotten from the audience is, along with, we talked about the parking amenities. What about other amenities such as gymnastics or exercise or other things that you might be incorporating into your buildings that maybe we don't know about?
Well, yes, or go ahead, Mike.
Okay, I was going to say we do include exercise equipment wherever we can in our buildings, and gardens for the residents to use. We'll build boxes. Ideally, we'll have one for each unit, but sometimes we don't have room for that, so they have to kind of be shared. But yeah, these are things that we found are great. We're working on a project right now that's actually going to have a sort of an urban farm included in it. So it's going to be more than just a few boxes, and we'll have an outside consultant of some kind to actually run the urban farm, but we're going to use it for educational purposes for the residents too.
Yeah, and we include a variety of amenities at our properties as well. They're typically geared for the population, be it a senior community or a large family community. So, community gardening has been really popular at our senior communities. We typically provide reading rooms in addition, to just outdoor space. And then like at family properties, we provide play areas for the kids, and there are community rooms where there can be after school activities and things like that.
Awesome. That all sounds great. So, in light of all of these wonderful things that we're all trying to accomplish with affordable housing, I'm sure that it comes with some challenges trying to check all of these boxes of your values, of what aligns with your efficiency goals, and then what expectations your clients have. So what would you say are some of the challenges to developing affordable housing in Santa Clara County? And I'll hand it off to you first, Carl.
Yeah, thanks. So, money, as Ray was mentioning in his presentation, money is a big challenge. In order to create these units, it's important to have the funds to be able to do so. In addition to that, another really large challenge is entitlements. And for those audience members who may not know, entitlements is the term that's used for basically the city approvals that you need in order to be allowed to build an affordable housing building or any other building. And entitlements can be really difficult and time consuming. They can add a year to 2 years to a project's timeline pretty easily. And part of that is because our leaders often hear from folks that are less than excited about our affordable housing developments. They hear from the people who want more parking in our buildings, and things of that nature. So to the extent folks see a benefit to less parking, it's great to let your voice be heard. If there's really a call to action that I could ask of the audience members who are interested in seeing more homes like this in our community, it's if you see an affordable housing community proposed in your community, in your neighborhood, it's to proactively support it and let your local leaders know that you support affordable housing as well.
Thanks. Great call to action, Carl. Thank you so much for that. What about you, Mike? What are your views on the challenges?
I would have to echo what Carl said. It's financing and getting the local community to buy into it so that everybody's happy with it.
Thank you. And we do have a little bit of a technical question from one of our attendees today. Angie would like to know a little bit more about Measure A and how that works with your projects. I don't know how much information you can provide about this on either front, but maybe you can tell her a little bit of, if you do know, how often the allocations occur. She would like a little bit more detail about that relationship.
I can take that one, Rocio.
Awesome. Thank you, Natalie.
Sure. So the county has an over-the-counter NOFA, and all of our funding sources are available through that NOFA. And we typically package up projects in groups and take them to our board twice a year for approval. We do sometimes take projects off cycle. We do have a variety of different sources that are within our NOFA, and we're always looking for more, applying to the state and whatnot. But I will say that the 2016 Measure A funds are the most powerful tool in our toolbox.
Great. Thank you so much, Natalie, for jumping in. And thank you for the great question, Angie. Another audience question that we've gotten is, what about smaller sized apartments? Are those part of the higher density approach as well?
We have a kind of a limitation put on us by the low income housing tax credit requirements. There's a set of sizes that are minimum sizes for apartments there. And we actually find that their requirements or their minimum sizes are a little bit smaller than we'd like them to be. So we set ours as just a little bit bigger than what the tax credit requirements ask for. You know, small apartments are nice, but they're cramped, and we feel like when we're serving the low income population, that it really doesn't work for us to give them substandard housing like small apartments or, you know, lesser quality fixtures or things like that. It seems like these buildings that we build and the apartments that we build ought to be at least as good as the market rate ones.
Well, thank you so much for that, Mike. I think we can all agree with you on that front. Okay, so then this one is for you, Carl. Can you tell us a little bit about ground floor activation? What is that, and how have you been able to incorporate that into one of your projects or your projects in general?
Yeah, so we're starting to do that on some of our more recent developments, and that's in response to feedback from the community. So one of our projects, a little west of Diridon, kind of in the Rose Garden neighborhood of San Jose, Bellarmino Place. It's a 116 unit affordable family project. 6 stories, and the ground floor, one side of the building faces Race Street. On the ground floor, we're building some community serving space facing Race Street, about 2,000 square feet. We haven't programmed or filled that space yet, but we're planning on working with some sort of organization that's complementary to our mission. And in addition, we're working on the east side of downtown, a site on East Santa Clara around 14th Street, where our plans there include retail on the ground floor facing East Santa Clara Street. And that's consistent with the urban village plan that is guiding the future planning for that area of the city. One thing that is worth noting with kind of that ground floor activation is it is a challenge for affordable housing. Most of the affordable housing sources are not designed to pay for non-affordable housing uses. And so, you know, as we incorporate these types of activation into our projects, it's, you know, making it just that incrementally more complicated.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that answer. We do have a follow-up question for Mike. Mike, one of our attendees would like a little more detail about the difference between the square footage for the tax credit and the square footage that you guys might implement. I don't know if you have the numbers off the top of your head, but could you describe that difference a little bit more for us?
Okay. Yeah. So for studios are the smallest, and 3 bedrooms are the biggest that we do. And I think on the studios we increased it about 50% from the tax credit requirement, and then for the 3 bedrooms we increased it less, only about 10%. And in the 1 bedroom and 2 bedrooms are sort of in between on a continuum there.
Okay, thank you so much. I hope that provided more clarity for our attendees. And so one more question that I have for you is, what are some strategies for the future of funding for affordable housing? I know we talked today a little bit about Measure A, but what can you share with us about, you know, about the future?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, you know, we've talked about a lot of the important strategies and issues at play. Money is really important, and San Jose just passed Measure E, which is great. Measure A has been fantastic, and really looking forward to whatever may come in the future from the county. In addition, from time to time, there's state funding sources, either from bonds or from the state budget. And, there are publicly owned pieces of property that can really help to be the starting point to create more affordable housing.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that answer. And now I challenge all of the attendees to ask questions of Carl and Mike while we have them. They have made themselves available today for us to really pick their brains on what it takes to develop affordable housing in Santa Clara County. And I think they've done a great job of answering our questions so far. Thank you so much for that. Okay, we have one in here, and Alex, let me give it to you while I read this question.
Okay. Just wanted to ask Carl and Mike, why do you guys do the work you do? What makes you passionate about it? How has it affected you personally, if at all, related to your own story or people you know? Would just love to know where your heart is on this issue, as well as all the great stuff you're sharing from your head.
Would you like to go first, Mike, or I'm happy to go first?
Oh, all right. Yeah, it's gosh, it seems like one of the worthwhile things to be doing as an architect. I always wanted to work in housing, and when I got the chance to work in affordable housing originally, it really impressed me as being a good kind of project to work on. So I always wanted to continue it. So that's why I switched from working for architects to working for a developer.
Yeah, and I think for me, it's really a nexus of two things that I am both interested and passionate about. I mean, one, I'm just kind of a building nerd. I like buildings. I like the overall design. I like all the little details that nobody pays attention to. And then also, just social justice is really important to me. I feel like society is judged by how it treats the least among it. And it's really, I want to do something that helps make the world a better place and positively impacts people's lives.
Well, we
Not everybody
definitely
has a
appreciate your work. Yeah. Well, thank you to both of you so much for the work that you do in affordable housing. I think everyone here is definitely invested in that topic, and happy to have you both in the field. We've gotten some questions from attendees. One is a particularly technical question, so I'm going to do my best with the acronyms. First, from Faith, we have, with a large increase in the county's collective regional housing needs allocation goals, what can the county do to really ramp up funding to meet this need?
So on the staff side for county, I think we're really doing what we can to try to leverage state resources. We very proactively monitor their NOFAs and try to apply for everything that we're eligible for. So I think that's kind of the first line of defense. But as Ray alluded to earlier, there's only so much we can do with what we have. So I think more funding is needed. For BAFA, we are meeting with them to learn more about potential opportunities there.
Awesome. Thank you so much for jumping in, Natalie. For county, for really policy specific and county specific information, we definitely defer to Natalie on the topic. So we're very thankful for her to be in on the webinar today. And then another question from one of our attendees, Naseem, is are you working with local organizations who are involved in advocating for green space? I know that Mike, you mentioned sustainability already a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Some of our buildings don't have a lot of green space. They take up their whole lot, and so it's just courtyards and rooftop decks is all we can offer. But we've always got something. It just seems like a very important component that people shouldn't really live without. As far as working with local organizations, we have gotten involved with some groups that are involved in the urban farming to kind of find out how that works. But that's sort of a new initiative for us, so we don't really have it finalized yet.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Mike. What about you, Carl?
Yeah, I think our experience has been similar to what Mike's described. Honestly, I can't think of a specific organization that we've worked with, but we do try to incorporate open space into our projects because that's an important part of life and living a healthy life.
Nice. Thank you so much for that. So we don't have any questions now, but I have a question. It sounds like, you're both very invested in the quality of affordable housing in the county and bringing this amazing resource to those in need. But it sounds like, the resources to provide, let's say, a green space for the affordable housing and ground floor activation for the affordable housing isn't yet implemented in these efforts, and particularly when you're both so focused on efficiency. Is there anything that we can do to support that on either of your behalf?
Yeah, that is a really good question. I think going back to local government approvals, that's really important. Part of it is the financing structure for affordable housing is pretty complicated, and I'm trying to think about what can be done to help uncomplicate that. I do think that to the extent that there, not to be a broken record, but to the extent there were more local sources or statewide sources or even federal sources for that matter that were more flexible in what they could pay for, I think that would help to accomplish those kinds of goals. I think you do see some programs. The one in particular that comes to mind is at the state level. There's what's called the IIG program, and I'm blanking on the exact words. Infrastructure is one of the words. I think the Infrastructure Improvement Grant. But that is one of the few programs that is actually designed to do things like build affordable housing in addition to providing like transit improvements or things like that.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that, Carl. So again, I hand it off to the attendees. If there are no other questions, or if you guys have any remaining questions, please feel free to jump in and ask the developers while we have them here. Natalie has also been gracious enough to continue answering questions on behalf of the Office of Supportive Housing on some of the more technical aspects of affordable housing. So please think of them as a resource that are available to you for the next few minutes. And yeah, we would love to keep the conversation going. And just to clarify for those that arrived late, the presentation did include a description of the projects that are currently fully constructed, as well as those that are still ongoing on behalf of the Office of Supportive Housing. everyone who registered for the event and attended today will have a copy of that presentation available, as well as the recording today. So don't worry if you missed the beginning. You will definitely have an opportunity to jump back and take a look at the particulars of the different development projects still going on.
Rocio, I thought I might ask a question if that's okay.
Yeah.
To Ray, Natalie, Carl, in particular, where would we be without Measure A if it hadn't been built, or where would we be without some of the funding that has gone in our county to homelessness issues? I know, folks are feeling this out in the community right now, but I think we've also got to look at the successes and strides we've made. I wonder if you're willing to talk a little bit about that.
Sure. I'll jump in first. Thank you, Alex. It's a really good and important question. I think we'd be in an absolutely terrible space. Going back to the early 2010, 11, 12, when we lost redevelopment, the redevelopment agency, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in affordable housing development was lost to our community. And we really had no viable source. And because of state tax measures like Prop 13, there really is no way for us to get the type of dollars that we need to produce affordable housing in our community. So Measure A, that affordable housing bond, was so critical. And it came on the heels of a homelessness study in our community, Home Not Found, that saw that we were spending hundreds of millions of dollars just managing people on the streets. So Measure A comes along, we're able to put thousands of units into the pipeline, since 2015, house nearly 20,000 of our residents. If you can imagine a community where we hadn't done that, where we weren't getting the most vulnerable people off the streets, you can imagine where we would be today, following a pandemic, following one of the greatest economic turmoils we've ever seen. It's scary to think about that. And the creation of the county's Office of Supportive Housing, we got the director on the line today as well. Natalie's team, all of this work came in the last 8 years. I mean, we've just started doing this work and just getting into it. And on top of that, with the city of San Jose really stepping up and being another key partner in this work, and the Housing Authority of Santa Clara County, I mean, we're very fortunate that we've got a great, amazing team of really creative governmental agencies working on this issue. And while I know it feels bad for a lot of the people out there, I think that we are at the point that we're at, and we're going to see things get better and better because of the people that we have in place and the will of the voters and the elected leaders to get this work done.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Ray.
Rocio, I think Ray is absolutely right. Before 2015, we had less than 300 supportive housing units total. And thanks to Measure A, we have over 3,600 supportive housing units that are either open, under construction, or in our pipeline.
Wow, that's amazing. And I think we saw from those charts earlier that you guys have made amazing progress in providing more homes with these funds. So definitely excited to see the progression of those projects and the accomplishments that you've all been able to get through this funding. We've had a couple more questions come in through the chat. So one is, I think there has been some talk about the regulations associated with affordable housing. Another question that came in through the chat is, what is the impact of the categories of people that are allowed in particular buildings, particularly the LGBTQI community, and how will they be able to access some of these fundings in the future?
So it sounds like the question is about who is eligible to apply as tenants. So for the supportive housing units, folks are referred through our coordinated entry system through the county. So the county has a referral process for those specific units. And similarly, the Housing Authority has a referral process for units that have project-based vouchers. Other units, it depends. It depends on the target population. It depends on, city funds, other funding sources. So it's certainly possible to set up different programs, but it just depends on the specifics.
Thank you so much for that, Natalie. We have another question about Measure A, and I think, it's clear to us with the dates and everything that Measure A is has accomplished a lot of success in the time that it was assigned, and it's almost complete, right? We're kind of wrapping it up. We got a few more years left. What is the next step? What is a call to action for today's attendees? I know Carl has mentioned a couple of times that that there's a need to continue supporting affordable housing. Is there anything you can tell us about how to do that?
Yeah, I think as far as supporting affordable housing, there are a variety of organizations that are active in the space, Catalyze SV being one of them. SV at Home is another organization that's active in the affordable housing space in Santa Clara County. And step one is just becoming aware of what affordable housing developments are out there, what organizations are active, and educating yourself. And, those organizations can help, if you're interested in advocating, they can help you. They have tools that can help with that. And it's also just, voicing, your opinion with your local elected leaders.
Well, thank you so much for the plug, Carl. I think Alex and I are very passionate about affordable housing, among other issues, and definitely look forward to connecting with all of the attendees here in our follow-up communications. We have another attendee question here, and when is construction or deconstruction of the overpass on Park Avenue in San Carlos scheduled to begin? A very particular question about something that's supposed to be happening in the community.
For Mike. That might be for Mike.
Okay.
If we're talking about the place where San Carlos goes over the railroad tracks, we had been told that it was several years out, but we don't have any specific information on it.
Okay. So we've come to the end of our official time. And as you guys have seen on the agenda, some of our speakers may like to hang out and continue to answer questions at this time. Our attendees are welcome to continue submitting questions. At the minimum, we'll be able to record them for future educational events. As Carl has mentioned, a critical part of being involved in the conversation is being educated on the topic, being aware of what's going on in the community, and being able to provide input moving forward. With that in mind, Catalyze SV is here to continue hosting educational events around this topic. I'm going to include my email in the chat for anyone who is interested in staying involved and learning more about our program, as well as the link to our website, where you can learn more about our community engagement and also about our policy advocacy committee, which is a volunteer committee that grades development projects based on different values for those members that might want to become a little bit more active in our engagement. And then we do have a contact slide for the county that I will share now, while everyone kind of decides whether they're going to hang out or continue to submit questions. Give me 1 second. Here we go. Okay, and I will pull these links as well for the chat. So again, thank you so much for all of our panelists here today. I think we all really appreciate the time that it took to both prepare the information for everyone, so that we could really understand what's going on and get a sense of where we are in affordable housing creation in the county. I think the progress, it has definitely been conveyed to all of us that there has been significant strides made in the last few years to create a resource for the most vulnerable members of our population. We would love to see that to continue, and I know that it's going to take all of us to do that together. So thank you so much to our panelists, and for those of you who are not able to stick around, we look forward to seeing you again in future events, and please feel welcome to reach out to any of us in the future. If any of our panelists would like to say anything before people start logging off.
Just appreciate everyone attending.
Thank you, everyone. Happy Affordable Housing Month. Have a good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Actually,
See,
sorry about that, everyone. There we go. Okay.
I also want to give a shout out to not just Destination Home, but Mara West Credit Union and the Office of Supervisor Otto Lee for supporting tonight's event. Thank you for our supporters. Appreciate it. Any other questions for any of our panelists that folks want to ask?
We are going to keep the Zoom open until 7 o'clock for those participants that want to stick around, or those speakers that want to stick around and join us and chit chat, kind of as an unofficial networking opportunity. But all participants who need to go and are ready to kind of rejoin their families today, you're welcome to do that at this time. Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate you joining us this afternoon.
Yeah, thank you for organizing.
So we do have one question that came into the chat. It's kind of, what was your experience when you first started being involved in affordable housing development? What was that entry into this field like for you?
Yeah, it's I think in a certain way, for me anyway, it's not dissimilar from many other experiences in life. It's when you're really unfamiliar with this world, it's a whole new world, and that's one of the things that's really engaging about it is every day you learn something new. To this day, I'm still learning new things. There's so many different aspects to the properties and the way the financing works and the people you can serve. It's every property is different, and that starts at day one when you get in this, and you just kind of, like many things in life, you start learning and you keep building on it.
I might say that I almost think I learned more on my second project than my first, and more on my third project than my second. So,
yeah.
So I'm going to share one more screen with those of us that are still here, and that is our schedule for CSV's committees. As I mentioned, we have our project advocacy committee, which is more involved in analyzing the different development projects, which we bring to the volunteers. In addition, we have our community engagement committee, which is more geared towards providing feedback on how we host these meetings, how we bring resources for engagement to you all, and how do we make the information as accessible to everyone as possible. In addition, we have a regular newsletter and our donation website. We definitely encourage all of you to explore the website. There's definitely a lot to learn about the organization and the different levels of involvement. Again, we definitely appreciate everyone joining us today and being a part of this update on Measure A and the status of affordable housing creation in the county. I think we're all definitely invested in seeing what happens next and seeing the completion of these resources. So definitely stick around for future conversations.